New Year's Eve has always felt like a deadline to me. You're supposed to be somewhere, doing something, kissing someone. But in 2013, I was 31 years old and I just wanted to be asleep. I was living in a rental house on the edge of Fort Collins, Colorado. It was a small, boxy thing with siding that had peeled in the sun and windows that rattled every time a truck drove by. The neighborhood was a mix of families who had been there since the 70s and college students who treated every Tuesday like a fraternity rush. That night, the temperature had dropped to single digits. The air was so dry it made your skin itch. I wasn't alone by accident. My girlfriend, Kara, was an ER nurse pulling a double shift at Poudre Valley Hospital because holiday pay was triple time and she was saving for a Subaru. My friends were all downtown in Old Town, paying cover charges to stand in crowded bars and drink watered-down whiskey. I had been invited, but after a 60-hour week at my own job, the idea of standing in a line in the freezing cold sounded like torture. So the plan was simple: stay home, eat a frozen pizza, drink a beer, and be unconscious by 12:05. The only other living thing in the house was Milo. Milo was a mutt I'd picked up from the Larimer County shelter 2 years prior. He was 50 pounds of nervous energy, tan fur, big bat ears that moved independently like radar dishes, and eyes that always looked a little worried. He wasn't a guard dog. He was the kind of dog who hid behind my legs if a grocery bag rustled too loudly. But he was smart, and he was consistent. If Milo barked, there was a squirrel. If Milo whined, he needed water. He didn't do drama. That night, the drama was all mine. I had put a frozen pepperoni pizza in the oven at 10 and promptly fell asleep on the couch. I woke up 20 minutes later to the smoke alarms screaming and a kitchen that smelled like charred cardboard. "Happy New Year," I muttered, scraping the black crust off the edges into the sink. I ate the salvageable parts standing at the counter, washing it down with a cheap IPA. The house was cold.
The furnace was running, but the insulation in that place was a joke. I was wearing a thick Carhartt hoodie and wool socks, and I could still feel the draft ghosting across the floorboards. Milo was already acting weird. Usually after dinner, he'd curl up on the rug and pass out. Tonight, he was pacing, click, 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 when his nails on the cheap laminate floor. He'd walk to the front door, sniff the crack, then walk to the back door and do the same. "Relax, buddy," I said. "It's just the wind." But I knew it wasn't the wind. Around 11:30, the neighborhood started to wake up. It's a specific sound, the pre-midnight surge. Car doors slamming, people shouting across lawns, and the first few fireworks, pop, pop, bang. They were distant at first, illegal mortars going off in the county, but Milo hated them. Every time one cracked, his ears would swivel, and he'd stop pacing, freezing in place like a statue, until the echo faded. At 11:50, I decided to take him out one last time. I didn't want to be standing in the backyard at midnight when the real barrage started and he got too scared to do his business. "Come on, let's go," I said, grabbing his leash. The backyard was small and sad. It was enclosed by a chain-link fence that was starting to rust at the bottom, surrounding a patch of dead, patchy winter grass. In the far corner stood a scraggly elm tree that looked like a skeleton hand reaching out of the ground. The neighbors behind me had a 6-foot privacy fence, a solid wall of wood that blocked any view of their yard. I opened the back door and the cold hit me like a physical slap. It was brutal. The air smelled of wood smoke and sulfur, that distinct 4th of July smell, but frozen. Milo trotted out, did a quick lap, and peed on a frozen weed. He didn't linger. He looked back at me, shivering, ready to go in. "Good boy," I said. We went back inside. I locked the deadbolt, a habit from living in apartments, and dumped a little leftover chicken into his bowl as a treat.
I sat on the couch and turned on the TV to watch the ball drop in New York, which had already happened hours ago but was being replayed for our time zone. I wasn't really watching. I was scrolling on my phone, checking texts from friends. "Happy NYE, miss you." The reception in that house was garbage. Unless I stood right by the front window, messages took forever to send. I watched the little blue progress bar stall halfway. At 11:59, the noise outside changed. It wasn't just random pops anymore. It was a roar. The people 3 houses down started lighting off a brick of something heavy, rapid-fire explosions that shook the window glass in the frames. Horns honked, people cheered. Milo, who had been chewing on his chicken, stood up. He didn't bark, he didn't whine. He walked to the back door and stood there. "You just went out," I told him. "We're not going back out there." He didn't look at me. He was staring at the bottom of the door, his nose twitching. His tail was stiff, sticking straight out. The TV counted down. 10, 9, 8. Milo let out a low, vibrating sound. It wasn't a growl exactly. It was a rumble deep in his chest. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year, the TV shouted. Outside, the world exploded. The sky lit up with flashes of red and white through the curtains. The noise was deafening. But Milo didn't flinch at the noise this time. He scratched at the door, once, hard. I sighed. Fine. Quick pee, then bed. I walked over, clipped the leash onto his collar, and unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door. The backyard was chaos. Smoke drifted through the air in thick gray ribbons, illuminated by the flashes of fireworks from the next street over. It was loud, constant cracks and booms that made my ears ring. Milo stepped onto the concrete patio, and then he stopped, dead. He didn't sniff. He didn't circle. He locked onto something. His body went rigid, every muscle tight under his short fur. His ears were pinned forward, laser-focused on the far corner of the yard. "Milo, come on," I said, tugging the leash. He wouldn't move. He was a statue. I looked where he was looking. At first, I saw nothing.
Just the chain-link fence, the dead grass, and the scraggly elm tree in the corner, about 30 feet away. Then a firework went off directly overhead, a massive green starburst that lit the yard like a flare, and I saw it. There was a shape behind the tree. It wasn't a shadow. Shadows move with the light. This stayed solid. It was crouched low, tucked into the V-shape where the tree trunk met the frozen ground, half hidden by darkness and smoke. But that green flare had caught the curve of a shoulder, the hood of a sweatshirt, the outline of a head turned slightly, like it was listening. My brain tried to reject it, tried to file it away under something ordinary. A trash bag caught on the fence, a big clump of weeds, a trick of the porch light. But then the shape moved, just an inch, a slow shift, like it was tightening itself behind the tree when the light hit. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. Someone was in my yard, not walking through, not cutting across, not a neighbor leaning over to grab a ball, hiding. Milo let out that low growl again, and this time I realized what scared me about it. He wasn't trying to scare the person. He was warning me. He was doing it quietly, like he didn't want to give away exactly where we were. I swallowed and tried to make my voice work. "Hey," I called out. It came out thin and uncertain, swallowed instantly by the fireworks. Milo's growl deepened, turning into a sound that vibrated through the leash. His whole body leaned forward, muscles tight, claws clicking against concrete. Another firework went off, a white flash that made the yard look like a photograph. I saw more. A hand, pale against the bark, a knee in dark pants. The way the person's weight was balanced like they were ready to spring. My heart started punching my ribs. "Can I help you?" I said louder. The words sounded ridiculous the moment I said them, like I was greeting a neighbor at a barbecue. No answer, no apology, no quick sprint to the fence. Nothing. The person stayed crouched. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't someone who got caught doing something dumb.
This was someone who expected to be here. Milo barked once, sharp and aggressive, the loudest bark I'd ever heard from him. Then he lunged hard enough that the leash bit into my fingers. The person behind the tree didn't flinch. They were used to dogs. That thought was like ice water down my spine. I pulled Milo back. "Inside, now," my voice cracked. He resisted, planting his paws. He wanted to go forward. He wanted to put himself between me and that tree. I had to drag him. We stumbled over the threshold, and I slammed the door hard enough that the glass rattled in the frame. I threw the deadbolt, then I locked the handle. Then I stood there with my palm pressed to the door, breathing so hard my vision pulsed. Milo paced in a tight circle, nails clicking, then pressed his nose to the crack at the bottom of the door and growled like a motor. I killed the kitchen light. The room went dark. The fireworks outside were still going, but now they felt like they were happening in my living room. Every blast made the house creak. Every cheer made it harder to hear anything real. I crept to the kitchen window that faced the backyard. My movements were slow, careful, like the air itself might betray me. I pinched the edge of the curtain and pulled it back maybe an inch. The porch light was still on from when I'd opened the door. It lit the steps and a small patch of patio, but the rest of the yard was a swamp of shadows. Smoke drifted over the fence in lazy sheets, catching flashes of red and green from the sky. I waited for a bright burst. Bang! The tree was empty. My pulse jumped. Where did you go?
I scanned the fence line. Bang! Another flash. There, movement, low to the ground. The person was sliding along the fence, not walking upright, but crouch walking, keeping their profile small. They were moving toward the side gate, the gate that led from the backyard to the driveway, the gate I hadn't used in months because it was stuck. I knew that gate the way you know a bad step on a staircase. It had a very specific sound, a scrape and a metallic thunk. You had to lift the gate up to clear the ground, then tug it until the latch popped.
I watched the figure reach for it. A gloved hand grabbed the latch. Their other hand went to the top of the gate, fingers curling over the cold chain link. Then the fireworks helped him. A mortar went off so close it rattled the silverware in the drawer. Under that boom, I saw the gate shift. I didn't hear the screech. The explosion swallowed it, but I saw the gate swing inward. It opened, and the figure slipped through, low and smooth, like they'd practiced moving without making sound. My mouth went dry. If they were in the driveway, they could be at the front door in seconds. They could be in the house in... I looked down at Milo. He wasn't looking at the back door anymore. He was looking toward the front of the house, like he could hear something I couldn't, like he knew the person had changed position. The fireworks kept going. The neighborhood kept celebrating. And my house, the drafty rental where I'd burned pizza and planned to fall asleep, suddenly felt like a glass box in the middle of the woods. I backed away from the window, my hands shaking. I needed to call Kara. But my phone reception was terrible inside. I'd have to stand by the front window to get a signal, and the last thing I wanted was to silhouette myself like a target. I needed to call 911. I needed a weapon. I didn't own a gun. I didn't even own a baseball bat. I was a guy who kept extra HDMI cables in a junk drawer. I grabbed the first thing I saw that felt heavy enough to matter, a cast iron skillet I'd left drying on the rack. It was cold and dense, the kind of weight that made your wrist ache immediately. It felt absurd, like I was cosplaying as someone brave. Milo followed me, low and tense, his growl constant now. I moved to the living room and killed the TV so its flicker wouldn't paint us through the curtains. The room went pitch black except for the occasional strobe of fireworks leaking through the fabric. I stood with my back against the wall near the hallway, skillet raised, listening. The fireworks created this awful rhythm, huge bursts of noise, then thin pockets of quiet where you could almost hear the world. In one of those pockets, I heard it, a soft scrape.
Not in the yard, on the porch. Then another, the sound of something brushing the welcome mat. Someone was right outside the front door. Milo's growl changed pitch. He moved in front of me, between me and the door, body angled like a shield. His ears were forward, and his tail was stiff. But he didn't bark. That was the worst part. If he had barked, it would have made sense. Barking is a dog alarm. This quiet growl felt like a warning you give when you're not sure you'll win. I watched the doorknob. It was old brass, tarnished, with little scratches from keys over the years. Slowly, so slowly it didn't even look real, it began to turn. The latch clicked. The knob kept turning until it hit the stopper. The door didn't open. I had locked it. I must have. But my brain started doubting itself instantly. Did I lock the front door earlier? Or just the back? Was the deadbolt even engaged? Then the knob twisted the other way, like they were testing it, like they were making notes. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a rush of blood. I raised the skillet higher. And then the person knocked. 3 slow knocks. Thud, thud, thud. They weren't polite. It wasn't a neighbor wanting sugar. It wasn't a drunk guy at the wrong house. It was measured. It felt like a mechanic tapping a tire. I didn't mean to yell, but my fear snapped into anger. "Who is it?" I shouted. "Get off my property!" Milo barked once, sharp, like punctuation. Silence. Then a voice, muffled through the door, low, gravelly, calm. "Your dog," the voice said. "He sounds big." That sentence did something to me. It wasn't threatening directly. It wasn't insulting. It was assessing, like the person on the other side was doing math. Risk versus reward. I didn't answer. I tightened my grip on the skillet until my knuckles went numb. Outside, the fireworks slowed for a moment. In the reduced noise, I heard something else. A tiny metallic clink. Not from the door. From the side window. My eyes snapped to the living room window that faced the driveway. The blinds shifted, just a fraction, like someone's hand had tested them. Milo whipped his head toward the window and snarled, a sound so raw it didn't even sound like him. I took 2 steps toward the window, still staying in shadow. I pinched the corner of the blind and lifted it a millimeter. I saw a figure by the window, hood up, dark jacket, face angled away. Their hand was near the glass, holding something thin and metallic, a tool, a pry bar maybe, or a screwdriver, something meant to slip into a frame. My stomach clenched. The front door was a distraction. They were checking for an easier entry, and they were doing it while the neighborhood screamed and cheered and drowned out every sound. I pulled the blind back down. "Milo," I whispered, and my voice was shaking. "Stay. Stay." I didn't even know what I wanted him to do. Attack? Hide? Be quiet? There was no good option. I backed away from the window and moved toward the kitchen, toward the phone. I dialed 911 with my thumb. No bars. 1 bar. No bars. "Come on," I hissed. Outside, another huge mortar went off, and the window glass trembled. Then the doorknob rattled again. A harder twist. A shove. The door held, but the frame groaned. Milo barked this time. 2 deep barks, bigger than him. The figure outside went still. I pictured them listening, counting, imagining what kind of dog made that sound. Then the voice came again. "He sounds big," it repeated, like a final decision. I heard footsteps back away from the door. Then, running. Not full sprint, not frantic. A quick, controlled jog down the driveway. I rushed to the side window and peeked through the blinds. The figure was walking away now, not even hurrying, moving down the driveway toward the street. They were tall, taller than me, I think, and they wore a dark work jacket like mine, Carhartt style, hood up. As they reached the sidewalk, a firework flashed and lit their profile. I saw their face for less than a second, not enough to identify, but enough to see that they weren't drunk, they weren't stumbling, they were focused. They turned left and disappeared into the gap between streetlights, like they'd been swallowed. Only then did I realize my hands were cramping around the skillet.
I set it down on the coffee table as quietly as I could, like noise might bring the person back. Milo stood in the center of the living room, body angled toward the front door, still growling. I tried 911 again. This time, the call connected. 911, what's your emergency? There was a guy in my yard, I said, voice shaking. He tried my door, he tried my window, he just left on foot. What's your address, sir? I gave it. Are you in a safe location? I'm inside, door's locked, I have a dog. Okay, we are extremely busy tonight. Stay inside, do not go outside. An officer will be dispatched as soon as one becomes available. I hung up, and the worst part wasn't that they were busy. The worst part was realizing that for a little while, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, my safety was just a suggestion. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, the skillet in my lap, Milo pressed against my knee, and I waited for the next sound in the quiet between fireworks. When the officer finally showed up, it was after 3 a.m. The fireworks had mostly burned out by then. The neighborhood was quiet in that exhausted post-celebration way, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every distant car, every heater kicking on, every dog barking 3 streets away. A single cruiser rolled up, lights off, then flashed its spotlight across my driveway. I stepped onto the porch with Milo on the leash, both of us squinting against the glare. The officer was young, maybe mid-20s. His eyes looked tired in the harsh beam of his flashlight. He walked the perimeter with the slow, careful steps of someone doing a routine. He asked me to explain everything again, from the burnt pizza to the shape behind the tree. He nodded a lot, but the nods didn't mean belief. They meant paperwork. New Year's brings out the weirdos, he said. Could be a drunk, could be someone cutting through yards. He was inside my fence, I said. He was hiding. He opened the side gate. The officer walked to the gate. He crouched down and jiggled it. This latch is pretty rough, he said. It was stuck, I insisted. It takes force to open it. He ran his gloved thumb over the metal and held it up to his light. A smear. Not much, but something. Okay, he said, tone changing slightly. Yeah, looks like somebody worked it. He shone his light along the ground, but by then a thin dusting of snow had started to fall, and the driveway was a mess of existing footprints. Mine, the officer's, and probably the neighbor's kid from earlier. The evidence was dissolving in real time. Any chance you got cameras? He asked. I almost laughed. No, I said, I'm renting. He asked if anyone had been hurt,
if anything had been stolen, if the door or window had been damaged. I told him no, not that I could see. He wrote a short report and handed me a case number like it was a consolation prize. "We'll keep an eye out," he said. Then he left. As his taillights disappeared down the street, I realized something else. The night hadn't ended because the danger was gone. The night ended because the guy chose to stop. I didn't sleep, not that night. I kept the lights on until sunrise and sat on the couch watching the front window like a lighthouse keeper. Milo eventually relaxed, but even when he finally curled up, his ears kept twitching, responding to sounds I couldn't hear. Around 6 a.m., I finally saw Kara's name light up my phone. I took the call in the kitchen, standing under the front window where the signal was best. "Hey," she said, voice exhausted, hospital noise in the background. "Happy New Year. You okay?" My throat tightened. Hearing her voice made everything real. "Someone was in the yard," I said. There was a pause. "What do you mean?" I told her, the whole thing, the shape behind the tree, the gate, the doorknob turning. When I got to the part where the guy said, "Your dog, he sounds big," Kara went quiet again. "I'm coming home," she said. "You can't," I said. "You're on shift." "I'm coming home when I can," she corrected. "Lock the doors. Don't go outside." "I didn't," I said. "Good." Her voice softened. "I'm glad you have Milo." After we hung up, I went to the backyard in the daylight.
The sun made the yard look pathetic again, just dead grass and chain link in a tree that needed to be trimmed. But the daylight also showed what the dark hid. At the base of the elm tree, the dirt was disturbed. Not dramatically, not like a fight, just compressed, like someone had been crouching there long enough to press their weight into frozen soil. Near it, half covered by brittle grass, was a cigarette butt, fresh, still pale against the brown. And on the bark, about knee-height, there was a scratch, a vertical gouge, white and raw against dark wood, like someone had dragged a knife tip down it. It wasn't a message, it was a mark. I walked to the side gate. The latch was open. The rust had been scraped away in a thin arc where something metal or gloved had forced it. I closed it and tried to relatch it. It stuck again, refusing to sit right, like it was offended I was touching it. I stood there for a long time, staring at my own driveway, imagining how easy it would be for someone to step through if they didn't care about noise. Except on New Year's Eve, no one cares about noise. Everything is noise. Kara came home after noon, face pale from a night under fluorescent lights. She hugged me so hard my ribs hurt, then hugged Milo. Milo leaned into her like he'd been waiting. We talked about moving in the calm, practical way couples do when they're trying not to admit how scared they are. 2 months later, I broke the lease, paid the penalty. The landlord complained, and I didn't care. I installed cameras at the next place, even though it cost money I didn't have. I put motion lights in the yard. I bought a real flashlight instead of that cheap one that smelled like dead batteries. But none of that changed the part that stayed with me. Not the image of a hood behind a tree, not even the doorknob turning. It was the way that voice sounded through the door. Calm, interested, like I was a problem being evaluated. And the reason the problem didn't get solved wasn't my threats or my courage. It was Milo. A dog who looked worried if you raised your voice. A dog who, for one night, sounded big. Milo is older now, gray around the muzzle, slower on the stairs.
But every New Year's Eve, when the first pops start and the neighborhood gets loud, he still does one thing. He stands by the back door. He listens. And I listen too. Not to the fireworks, to the silence between them. Because now I know what can move in that silence without being heard.